Okay, I've got a very special interview for you today with my business partner, Sam Ovens. If you want to know how to start a business with little money or experience, which is by far the most common question that I get, listen, we're going to go through 3 important points. We're going to hit on Sam's story, my story. This isn't just a regular interview where you just listen and it's like, cool. You're going to actually have an action plan. You can go from this to get going. And so you might be a stay-at-home parent. You might already have a job. You might even already be an entrepreneur. Open minds make the most money. Or as Warren Buffett, the billionaire, says, the more you learn, the more you earn. So in this next about 30 minutes, we're going to go through some solid stuff for you. That'll be inspirational, but more importantly, we'll give you like some tangible steps. I'm going to give you 3 important things that I think you have to know if you want to start a business with little money or experience. And by doing this, I'm here. This is Sam's penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side in Manhattan in New York. He's come from a small town in New Zealand, small country, 4 million people. And now, what's the saying? What's Jay-Z? If you make it here, you can
make it anywhere.
Make it anywhere.
Frank Sinatra.
It's Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Then it's Jay-Z, and now it's me and Sam. No, we have to modify it a little bit. But the point is, there's rewards to pulling off good stuff in your life. If you can pull wherever you are, you pull yourself out of a ditch. Sam's a college dropout. I'm a college dropout. Neither one of us inherited money. Neither one of us, got the head start that a lot of people get. I mean, we're lucky, thankful, we're born healthy and stuff like that, but we didn't have those advantages that a lot of people had when they start out in business, an inherited family business or something like that. So for you, as you find roadmaps, templates, business models that you can apply to your life, the quicker you do it, the cooler life you can live. I always say, if you want to know how to travel the world and make money having fun, that's what we're talking about. I just came back from a month in London and Norway and, traveling the world in New York. And I used to not be able to do that. I was stuck. So when you start absorbing what Sam's going to tell you, you're going to see that hope and that inspiration, like, yeah, I can actually pull this off. So, Sam, let's get started. Thank you. It's a New Zealand handshake.
I don't think we got one.
Kiwi, they shear sheep. So, scissors. Let's do. We're gonna
That's
invent.
definitely not it.
Maya, he doesn't want to do it. The reason I say that is because I was traveling the world, and then I ran out of money while I was in New Zealand, so I had to make enough money to get on an airplane and get out of New Zealand, and so I had to shear sheep. It's a very hard job. It is not a job that you'd want to do.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, so it'll make you strong though. They have a saying in New Zealand: never get in a fight with a sheep shearer. You'll always lose. That's what they say. Anyway, that is not relevant to this, but it is relevant to actually my story. And you got a cool New Zealand consulting story. So let's get started.
Sure. Well, my program, it's an online course and it shows people how to start their own consulting business completely from scratch.
Right.
So no idea what they're going to sell, no idea what skills they have, what market they're going to go into. They don't know how to sell, they don't know how to advertise, like literally starting from scratch, because that's where I was when I got started, and I know how hard that is. And it's really like one of the hardest things I've ever done was just sitting in New Zealand, like thinking I'm going to start a business, and like literally just sitting in front of Google, I'm like, what am I going to search for? Right. And so it took me a long time to figure it out. It took me a year to get my first client. It took me the whole next year to get to like $100,000. I know that's still quite fast, but it feels slow when you're doing it. A whole year to get one client is slow. And that's because I went at it alone, and it was really hard, it was really testing. And when I did figure it out, and not only figure it out, but really started to do well, a lot of people noticed, like, well, he must know something that we don't, because how come he's able to get clients and things like that. And that's when I realized that I had learned some things about starting a consulting business that weren't really conventional wisdom. And they weren't really things that were being talked about. They were kind of new. And I started helping, small groups of people with it. Well, it was actually just one guy called Stanley. And he basically saw what I was doing, and he was bugging me. He was like, teach me how to do it. And I was like...
Was that a friend or just like...
It was a guy I'd kind of like met. We were both entrepreneurs. We hadn't had any success yet, but then I kind of broke through with consulting, and then he kept bugging me, wanting me to teach him, and I was like, no, I'm busy doing it.
You're too busy to, yeah.
But then he was like, he offered to pay me, and I was like, I still hadn't made much money back then, and he offered me $1,000, and I was like, oh, $1,000, like, okay then, we can do this. We'll just do like 1 hour Skype call every week for like a few months, and we'll just see how it goes.
For $1,000?
Yeah.
He got a good deal, huh?
Oh, this is when I was...
But you didn't really
This is
know,
back
okay.
when I, like...
How many years ago was this? Not that long ago, though.
I say it like it's ages ago, but I started out in entrepreneurship when I was 21 years old, and that's when I got started. It took me a whole year.
Around 2008.
I don't even know. But I'm 27 right now. I just
27,
turned
so 6 years
27
ago.
like
Yeah.
a few days ago.
So 2010.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I got started at 21. It took me a whole year before I made my first dollar.
Yeah.
So a whole 12 months. I was 22 there.
Now pay attention to this, because this is a way, we're going to talk about ways that you don't have to go a whole year. Because if you could start over now, knowing what you know, it's not going to take you a year
I
to
watch
make
my
your first
students
dollar.
go from scratch
Yeah.
now, and I'm like, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Because, that was way harder for me.
Yeah.
And it's literally just because, if you walk over to a door and you're like, I'm going to take this door off its hinges and completely put it back on, like you're going to mess something up.
Right.
Right? Like you can't do things you don't know without practice and without instructions. And, people know that about conventional things, but people don't seem to pay
don't
attention to
apply
that
it
when
to
they
business,
start a
yeah.
business. They're like, I'll figure it out. I'm like,
That's one of the big problems. I tell people, it's like lifting weights. People, you tell, if I ask people, what do you think it'd take you to be successful? People will say hard work. And I say, well, the hardest working people at a restaurant is like the busboys. But they don't make as much as the owner. The owner's at home. So if I say if it's just hard work, that's like saying you take somebody who knows nothing about getting in shape, put them in a gym, and just say, do a lot of exercise. Most people are gonna hurt themselves. You ever seen that video clip where the dude, he doesn't know how to go in the machine right? And it's like I forget what machine it was. It's like a leg press or something. He puts like his shoulders in it, gets stuck in it. That's how people are as entrepreneurs. So it's not just one factor like hard work. If you think about the analogy, like you're saying, a door, or I always think of it as like weightlifting or health, you have to be trained by a coach. And the coach should be in better shape than you.
Well, yes,
like this guy that you were training, you were just barely in better shape than him, but you could still help him. Now you can take somebody.
Well, I could teach him how to get to where I was.
Right.
And that's what coaches do.
Right.
And that's what you got to really look at, is the person you're learning from where you want to be.
Yeah.
Because they can teach you how to get to where they are.
Yeah.
That's it. And so for him, that was perfect. He had no money. He wanted to just get his first client. We were holding Skype calls. I recorded them, put them in Dropbox. This is how ghetto this version 1 of this consulting thing was back then. And I kind of felt like guilty. I was like, I can't believe this guy's paying me money for calls, because I still hadn't associated advice with value that much. And I felt really guilty, so I was trying to give him more time and all sorts of extra things. But then something, really strange happened. He was like quite a shy guy, and he had like a stutter and everything. And he got a client, and it was a $10,000 one. And I was
Is that
like,
$10,000 a month?
No, it was one-off deal.
Single pay.
Single.
Because now you teach people, your big
recurring
thing is like how to get customers that pay you every month, so you have predictable income flow.
Yeah, I hadn't learned that one yet.
Yeah.
When I first taught Stanley.
Automated income, recurring income is by far the best type of income. If I had a choice between making, $100 million one time, or making, 10, 15 million, but boom, boom, boom on a regular cycle, I'd take the lower amounts because it's more predictable lifestyle. When you make a whole bunch of money, then you get excited, you spend it all, and you're broke. And that's one thing that I like when I decided to partner up with you. And talking about this program you have, I was like, he's doing it right because it's recurring. That's super important. In fact, if you're watching this, write that down. Figure out a business model that's recurring. Think of Apple. The iTunes store, a lot of stuff you sign up for, it's like $1 a month, but that person selling the app and Apple, who takes 30% cut, that's $1, and then another person does the next thing.
80% of their revenue, I'm pretty sure, is the iTunes store.
Yeah, it's crazy revenue. Think of Netflix, $9, $10, $12 a month, but they have, you're talking about companies doing almost $1 billion a month because enough people do it. So if you can build recurring, that's I want to kind of outline as we go through this. Point number one, when you're trying to build a business with little money or experience, on day one, think about a business model that gives you predictable income, ideally monthly, because quarterly and annually gets too far out, and then you're broke in between.
Your month to month works really well because it's just the kind of rhythm that the world works on.
Yes.
That's when your bills are due.
Yeah, your bills are due. I actually have a 67 step on that. It's like your bills are due every month, so you want your income to come in every month. And a lot of people, I call it the tyranny of the first and the first of the month, because most people, the money coming in their paychecks does not equal the money going out. That's why the average American only saves $1 for every $100 they make. They hardly have enough of a spread. So if you can counteract recurring expenses, that's one of my first business partners, John DeWar, is the one that really taught me that. So okay, so you taught this. So you've got this guy. You made $100,000. You helped him.
I taught him how to get one $10,000 client. And then I was like,
so he paid you $1,000 and made $10,000.
And I was like,
so he 10x'd it, but you should have charged him $1,000 plus a percentage. But whatever, you're a nice guy. We're nice. Sometimes.
Well, no, it taught me. It was. I wasn't. All it really taught me is, whoa, I actually have something.
Yes.
I was like, if this worked, I can work again.
Yeah.
I was like, if I learn one thing in business, it's like, if you can do it once, there's a very high chance you're going to be able to do it again. You just got to repeat the exact kind of scenario that happened the first time.
By the way, invest in this water company, because Sam drinks about 600 of these a day. LaCroix. I never heard about it. Is that you laughing in there? Sean's laughing in there. I've never learned about this water, but I think...
I actually was Googling. I was thinking of buying the company.
Yeah, you need to buy. And you could single-handedly raise revenues.
Yeah, well...
And so if you're the investor in the company, you put all your money into buying it, and then you pull it all back out as
Facebook
dividends.
ads for those little guys.
All right, back to bigger. But you know what? Going back to this business model of consulting, I want to talk about that for a second. I always say there's different businesses you can choose. If you're watching this and you want to start a business with little money or experience, different business models you can do. Some people want to go to college, get an MBA, go that route to become an entrepreneur through some through some college university program. Other people want to buy franchises. So if you look at Entrepreneur Magazine in the back, they have all these franchises. You can buy Kentucky Fried Chicken, you can buy McDonald's. I think a McDonald's franchise to have one store is $1.5 million. So you buy a McDonald's, $1.5 million, you're gonna have predictable income, because those 99% of McDonald's stores do decently. I think you make about 100 to 200,000 profit. So you put $1.5 million in, you make 200,000, you'll make your money back in about 7 years. What you have in, you give them a percentage. So that's one model. The problem with the franchise model is you got to have a lot of money to start. And both Sam and I, when we started, had basically zero. I mean, I had nothing. $47, probably less than that. And so another business model you can do is consulting. And you take this LaCroix water company here. I wasn't even planning to talk about this, but if you knew a lot about marketing, you could go to this water company, you could go to the Norwegian company Voss, you go to 5 different companies and say, hey, I've got a technique and I'm going to charge you $2,000 a month, $1,000, $10,000 a month. So that's called corporate consulting. The issue with corporate consulting that's a little bit tricky, big companies like this, if you don't have a big resume, it's a little bit harder. So one of the things you teach is more like consulting to small businesses.
I tried corporates.
Yeah,
and
Corporate's
it's
tough.
not for most people. Like,
Yeah.
for one, they demand like face to face,
Yeah.
and that's not freedom. And like that was a massive reason for starting my own business.
Yeah.
It was not to wear a suit, like with the tie, not to have to go into corporate offices, and with corporate deals, that's what you're still doing.
Yeah.
Plus, they often use the hourly billing model still.
Yes.
And
Which is a pain in the butt because then you're trading time for money.
you can never win. It doesn't matter how much you can charge.
Yeah.
You're never going to really win.
You can't scale it. So let's talk about this, because one of the things that I did to start, just to share my story for a second, I'm a college dropout. A lot of people know that. But when I was still trying to get a college degree, I think I have 8 credit hours from NC State University in North Carolina. So when I was there, I had a little side job, and I was like, I'll pay for my school by having a job. So I had this job, and I remember the first time the paycheck came, it was like $80 after taxes, and I was like, for 2 weeks, it was a part-time job, but I was like, my tuition's like $1,000 or $2,000, and I just made $80. So I was like, that's part of why I dropped out of college. But during that time, one good thing happened to me in college. I got access, because I couldn't afford a laptop back then. So I had the NC State had like computers you could use in the library for free. So I realized this consulting thing because I learned from some of my mentors. I remembered that they had done consulting. So I started a consulting. It was called, so it was for agriculture, because I had lived on a farm for 10 years. So I was like, I'll help people from other countries buy farmland in America. So this guy in New Zealand, which is funny because you're from New Zealand, Gary Townsend, I think I reached out and I said, is there anything I can help you with? He said, yeah, Ty, I'm looking to buy a farm somewhere in America, but I don't come to America that often. I know you've been around all over the US. Can you write me a report as a consultant for me? I'll hire you and I'll pay you my normal consulting fee. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I remember sitting in front of this free computer that NC State had, and I wrote, and it was like Word. It was the first time I had ever used Word, believe it or not, because I had lived on a farm with the Amish, so I never really used the computer before. So I knew a little bit. I wrote a Word document. It was like 3 pages. I emailed it to them along with my bank account wire info, and I'll never forget. Like a few days later, a wire came into my bank account. It was, I can't remember, unfortunately, if it was either I think it was $10,000 for like 1 hour for one project. And I remember being like, looking at my $80 paycheck from a job and looking at that, and I was like, I got to do more of this. And that was so one of my first businesses when I didn't have any money or experience or even computer was taking some, and that was something that you wouldn't think you could make money off, knowing where to buy a farm. Like, that's not a very, but you'd be surprised when you figure out any little thing you're good at and you advertise it, and especially you have a whole system on how to get customers that's more precise than I knew back then. It's like that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And in the same way, when you as an entrepreneur are ready, the customers start to appear. So let's talk about that for a second, because 2 other things I wanted to cover. So you figured out this system, New Zealand, you went from making 100 grand and you've gone all the way up into, you don't like to share your income, but enough that you can have a big penthouse, and trying to figure out how to buy. If he was asking me if you should get a Phantom with a Rolls Royce driver or not, I said no. You gotta be old to get a Phantom. Get a Ghost like I have. So if somebody's watching this and they hear, oh, recurring income, want to start a business with a little more experience, consulting might be something to look into. What if somebody's worried that they don't have any skills to being a consultant? Can you give some examples where people who just had everyday life experience could turn that into a consulting skill?
Sure. Well, it's not just about skills. Like, the person with the most skills doesn't make the most money. Quite often the person with the most skills is often broke. Like, people who keep going back to college to learn more. It's like they're keeping on acquiring the stuff, but they're never attaching it to something else. And real money is made when you attach skill to a problem. And so you need some kind of reference point to attach something to in order to create value. And no one understands this. People just look at what skills they've got. They're like, what do I know? I know English, I know some basic math, I know how to use Excel. I'm just saying what normal people do. Like, they're like, no one would pay for any of that. Like, that's not worth anything. And they discount what they know. But, what you know isn't really worth anything until you actually attach it to solving a specific problem. So I learned this really early on in business. When I created a company, it was an app, and I went out and tried to sell it, and everyone just kept telling me, hey, this is cool, but I don't need this. And I just heard it again and again, and I was like door knocking trying to sell this thing. And I heard those words so many times that like burned into my brain, and I was like, I've made some crucial mistake here. And I figured out that I was really selling something that people didn't need. And I learned that to sell something, people need it. And I really learned that you can't fight the market. Like, you can't come up with something which you think is cool and then go out and convince the market to want it. You have to take like desire that already exists in the marketplace and then harness that and tap into it.
Yes.
And so you go the other way, you could spend billions and still go broke.
That's like the app Color. There was an app
That's
Color.
Exactly
a
what I was
guy raised $40 million and wasted it all. Not one product. 50 million, I said. Never. And the one thing, the good analogy to understand this better, I always like to relate business to social life, because it's easier to understand social life. If you're a guy or a girl and you are attracted to somebody romantically, but they're not attracted to you, it's hard. Sometimes your best thing is just move on and find somebody who's attracted to you. If somebody doesn't like your look and doesn't like your personality,
it's waste your whole life.
Yeah, you could spend your whole life running after somebody, and people do that sometimes.
They do it in business too.
Yeah, and that's the analogy for business. People will go, I want people, like the guys who started this app called Color, which was kind of like a photo app, and they just did it wrong. Nobody wanted it. But the best example of doing it right is where I live in LA. This guy started an app, and he decided at the beginning he didn't know what he was doing, and he did it wrong. He said, I'm going to make an address book. So he made this address book, and nobody wanted the app because they already had an address book that came with the iPhone. So he sat there and was stubborn, and then finally the light came on, and he goes, you know what? Let me listen and start listening to what people actually want. And he was dating a girl, and his girl somehow had seen like somebody Photoshop another girl's picture, and she goes, I wish I could take a picture on my phone and look and have it all where I look prettier. And so that guy said, maybe I could take my address book app and make it a photo app and add little filters that you could swipe through. And so he changed the name to Instagram, and within 2 years he sold it for $1 billion.
It's because he listened to the market.
He listened to the market.
And that's how small guys can take on the big guys.
Yes.
Because like Color had 50 million, it had the best engineers, it had a dream team.
Yep.
And it had all the Silicon Valley behind it. It failed miserably.
So did Kodak went bankrupt that year.
But then some small, some guy who's broke in a garage can actually win if he gets this right.
Garage.
So this really is the most important. It's still to this day the biggest lesson I ever learned in business, and I still take it through till today. It's to look at the market and figure out what they truly want and desire, and then harness that, because it's always an uphill battle unless you get that right. So what I really learned is, well, instead of coming up with a product and then taking a gamble and seeing if people want it, how about I go to the market and ask them what they want? I was like, well, this is...
Sell to the willing. This is the lesson of life.
So I really, no kidding, this is as basic as it was, I started asking the businesses who I was going to, like the cafe, I was like, what's your biggest problem day to day? And I kept asking different businesses. And I was at this window tinting business one day, and I was asking him, what's your biggest problem? And I kept noticing that all of these companies, they kept telling me that they wanted more customers. And I was like, well, this seems pretty obvious. I mean, who wouldn't if you're a business? Yeah. But I was like, well, why can't you get more customers? I started to dig a bit deeper, and I found this huge trend where there was a lot of the baby boomer generation owned businesses, and it's 70% of the US economy, 70% of US wealth, pretty much all around the world. It all sits with baby boomers, and they were brought up with radio and print and the Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
So you opened a business, you put it in an ad in the Yellow Pages, and you just customers came.
Hoped. Yeah.
The phone actually rang. It was as simple as that. But then the internet came out, and now things have gotten pretty complicated. And a lot of these people are behind. But me being younger, I mean, I'd been brought up with this stuff. I was by no means an expert. I didn't know how to code or anything, but I realized that compared to this window tinting guy, I knew a lot. And I realized that I could help him. And so I just started talking to him about ideas which I had. I was like, well, you're making this mistake and this one. And he was just like, well, can you help me with this? And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I can do it. He was like, well, how much would you charge? And I was like, I had no idea what to say. And I just made up a number. I was like $1,000.
Yeah.
And he was like, let's do it. And that was my first ever deal. And that's what really taught me the fundamentals of what enables someone to make money in the world, which is a pretty big discovery. And that's really what my program's about. It's like how to go out and look at the world. Like how to, first of all, figure out what things interest you.
Yeah.
And then start looking into those, get outside of your own head, get outside of Google, stop asking your parents and stuff. Like, go ask some strangers, because they're the ones that got the money.
And let me add one thing to this. Notice that when you're broke, like when I'm broke, when I was broke and when Sam was broke, you have a hard time imagining that there's people who would pay you $1,000 or $2,000. Because to me, when I was started, $5,000 or $10,000 was like infinity. It was an endless amount of money. But what you realize, even when you're broke, if you have a skill, a small business person out there might be making $10,000 or $20,000 a month. And if you can give them a little edge, they'll gladly give you a couple grand a month. So then you get one customer giving you $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And once you can do it with one, now you got to prove a model. You go to a couple more in your area, or sometimes it's global. Sometimes you do it local, or sometimes you do it through the internet. You get 5 customers paying you $1,000 or $2,000. Now you're making 10,000. It's like, wow. And so wherever you are in life, especially if you're still struggling financially, realize that the amount of money in the world right now, I always compare it to a huge river. You could see, the East River there, or the Amazon River. And it's so big that all you have to do is, like a person, you take a little straw and you stick it in the river, and you'll be able to get as much water as you need. Well, in the same way, there's so much money flowing into businesses. In the US, it's $15 trillion economy. In the EU, I think it's a little bit bigger. All the countries combined, the EU, talking 15 to 20 trillion. The global GDP is something like 50 trillion, and it's projected to go up. So that's a huge river. You don't need even a millionth of a percent of it. You need a millionth of a millionth to live happily ever after financially. So that's one of, I'd say,
it seems hard to make until you realize how it's made. Like the value, understanding value for me, that was when everything changed. I was like, I don't need to become a genius. I just need to figure out how to solve problems.
Yep.
And that's what I did. I started looking for people's problems, seeing if I could solve it for them, and if I could, I'd make them an offer, and I made money. And it's not like it wasn't a trick or anything, because I was actually helping the business. They got results, so it's
a win. It's what you call a win. In life, you got a few scenarios. One of them is they win, you lose. One of them is they lose, you lose. And one of them is the opposite, you win, they lose. None of those really work. Where you make money is where they become better off, and you become better off. Like this business that you helped, they pay you $1,000, and then they make an extra $2,000 or $3,000. So you won because you didn't have the $1,000, now you have it, and they won because they acquired some skill. So the first thing that we talked about these 3 points. The third thing that I want to get to is this concept of, if you're watching this and you want to start a business with little money or experience, my advice is simple. I wish I could go back in time and have somebody tell me this is, Don't ever hunt for treasure without a map. If you want to spend the rest of your life, if there's $1 million in your backyard, but you didn't know where it was, like it could have been buried 30 feet down, it could be buried 1 foot down, it could be this big, like I saw there was a pearl. There's a pearl, some fisherman, and you see this in the news, he kept it under his mattress. It's like this big or something, it's worth $100 million. So if somebody took a pearl that big and buried it anywhere in your backyard or in your house, but didn't tell you where, didn't leave you a map, you might spend 10, 20 years. And that's why the average entrepreneur within 5 years goes bankrupt or closes the business down, because they're just running around for treasure with no map. So what I've done, because this question so often people ask me, I literally get 5,000 or 10,000 messages a day, and the number one question is, what would you do if you were me, Tai? And so this is why I wanted to interview Sam. Get a map, and there's a few different, you could also call them templates. It means somebody else has already gone ahead of you and charted it all out. So if you don't have a lot of money or experience, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't want to be making a lot of mistakes, because you'll run out of money before you find the treasure. If you don't have experience, you're just lost walking in circles. So my advice for you now is really think deeply on the map that you want to find. And what I did, usually in the modern world, you buy a map. For example, I was talking earlier about McDonald's. McDonald's basically has a map for entrepreneurs. They go, you want to be in the restaurant business? We've spent over 60 years mapping out how to sell French fries and hamburgers. For $1.5 million, you get a store, you get the letter, the big M letter, you get they give you a manual, they train you, you go to a school, it's called McDonald's University, literally. You go there, it's like a couple weeks school or a week-long school, and they give you the whole map. Here's how you sell, here's what color you paint the building, here's how you get a lease, like everything's laid out for you. Now, what people forget is, well, because I don't want to do McDonald's, you probably don't want to do McDonald's, you probably don't have 1.5 million if you're starting out. But there's maps for other things, like if you want to be a consultant, that is why Sam, created this whole 7-figure system to be able to really give a lot of people this map. And you've been giving it to people. The testimonials we're getting in your private face group are crazy. We're getting about 5 success stories a day?
5 every day, and we must have more than 300. So yeah, there's a lot.
Over 300 success stories for people doing this map. So in a nutshell, you've got like an online training class you do for free, right? So I've asked them to do one, especially for people watching my video. There is a link below. You click the link, it takes you to a website. You schedule, because there's a few, he's doing it to be convenient for you, a few different times. You press the button, whichever time you want, if you want it in the morning, afternoon, or whatever's best for you. And then you register for it, you claim your spot, it's completely free, and you're gonna go step by step, not because this interview was more like the general concept and the background of it, but this is actually a training program that you do for free, how you can figure out.
We're gonna go end to end, because I find when I got started, there's always gaps. It doesn't matter who you learn from or what source you find, there's gaps. And someone can teach you how to sell, but sell what?
Right.
Someone can teach you how to use Facebook ads, but to sell what? There's always these big things missing, and it's kind of like you find a little bit here and you find a little bit here, but you just can't kind of pull it together into into something that meshes together. And it took me a long time to do that. And I worked extremely hard to figure it out and really perfect it. And in this free webinar, which I'm going to be doing, I show you literally from the start to the end. So I don't leave out any blanks. I show you how to get started immediately using the skills that you already have, and how to pick your niche. So really how to think what you're come up with the things that you're passionate about, and then start looking at what industries would I even start researching, and then how to go in and start researching those industries to find out what problems they have. And so we can find an industry and a problem, because that's where it starts, and that's
something
where
you're curious about, passionate about.
Well, just a place where you can add value and you're interested in.
Yeah.
Because that's really all you need to start. If you just find a problem you can solve, but there's not any interest in it, you're probably not going to stick around to solve it. But if you find the two, you can solve it pretty quick, and you'll be passionate about it, so you'll want to keep learning and getting good at it. So when I look at the consulting industry right now, I've met and talked to people who have been a consultant for like 30, 40 years, and they still haven't figured out what their one thing is or what their niche is. So like, we cover this in step 1 of this webinar, and people get their niche. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people figure out what their niche is on this webinar. And there's people who have been out there in business for 30 years who still haven't figured this out. So, from the very beginning of the webinar, we're having a massive breakthrough. And then once we've figured out what your niche is, like what is your industry, what's the problem you're solving, what's the value you're creating, the next thing we need to know is, well, how are you going to package that together? How are you going to explain that to people? And how are you going to price it? That's the next obstacle. And on this webinar, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So how to take this problem that the market has and this knowledge and information which you have that's going to solve it, and really package it into an offer, come up with a price point, and how to do it in a way that's attractive to the customer and it's going to sell and actually attract high prices. So that's step 2. And then step 3 is how to get it in front of them. So once people know how they're going to create value, they know who the end customer is, and they know what the price of it is, and they know how to explain it, they're often left thinking, well, how am I even going to get that person's attention?
Right.
And so we're also going to cover that. And I'm going to show you, I've tried a lot of stuff. I did door knocking, cold calling, I've sent postcards, I've done so many different types of things. I even remember writing outside a university on the pavement using chalk, trying to advertise. I've like tried.
Till it rained. Then
and in New Zealand it rains a lot. And so I've tried like so many different things, and then online advertising too. And the one thing which I've really mastered when it comes to getting consulting clients is online advertising.
Yes.
And specifically with Facebook, which is one of those, the most powerful, in my opinion, it's the most powerful channel to get clients right now. And so on this webinar, I'm going to show you my current process for attracting and winning clients using Facebook ads. And I'm just going to show you exactly what I do.
Yeah.
And that'll enable you to be able to get out there and get in front of these people.
Yep.
And then the last step is, well, now that you've got these guys and girls' attention and you've got a scheduled appointment with them, what are you going to say in that appointment?
Yeah.
This is the next
That's
piece.
where you need a template, because or else you stand in front of them and go blah, 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 blah,
You
blah.
do all 3 of those things, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, it's a miracle if you do that on your own. Like if you did that in 2 years, it'd be a miracle.
Yeah.
And so, but then you're still going to get to that end process. You're going to end up on the phone, and you're not going to know where to begin.
Yeah.
And I've been there too, and it's painful. And I had to figure it out. And I've come up with a script and a proven process for, for taking someone from a complete stranger to a paying customer on one phone call in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of people might think that sounds unbelievable, but I've taught it to so many people now, and I've seen people who are introverted, I've seen people who have absolutely no sales background, people who like literally I swear they're not going to be able to sell.
Yeah. And
they take the script and they sell stuff.
Yeah.
And so it really is that good, and it's that good because I personally did over 1,500 sales calls. I
1,500
recorded them all, I transcribed them all, and I went through them all and I started lining them up, and I was like, what line did I say that blew that one up? What line did I say that made that one go good? And I put a disgusting amount of time and effort into it.
Yeah.
And came up with the script.
And that's a disgusting amount.
It really
if you'd
is
like
disturbing.
to spend a disturbing amount of time doing this on your own, do not click the link that we put below. It might be a
and I don't say that, like, it really is disturbing, like how much time it took me to get it to this point. Like, it's been...
It takes about 10,000 hours to get good at something.
I've got rescue
Or you
time.
can just learn from somebody who has 10,000 hours.
I've got rescue time on my computer. I've done way more than 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And
what is rescue time?
it's like a little thing that
Tracking
runs
app?
in the background and it records everything. And like, I've probably worked too hard to figure this stuff out. And I'm really taking my absolute best stuff, really boiling it down, distilling it, and just sharing it with everyone.
Yeah.
In this webinar, and you can really just take, you know, my best stuff totally for free, and if you just register for this webinar.
Yeah. So we're gonna put the link, depending on where you're watching this, well, it'll be above or it'll be below. What's also do we have a manual link if they're listening to the podcast?
TaiLopez.com/consulting.
Oh yeah. So if you're listening to this, just audio.
But
we do TaiLopez.com/Sam. /Sam. TaiLopez.com/Sam if you're listening to audio, or you can just click somewhere, depending on if you're watching YouTube, but my website, blah, blah, blah. And that'll take you to the register page. It's absolutely free. You don't have to put a credit card in to watch the call. And to go through the free online class. So go through, I tell people, whether you're skeptical or super excited, try lots of stuff. And this is definitely one of the things to look into if you're wanting to start a business with little money or experience. So, Sam, they're going to see you in a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, depending on when you schedule. I'm flying back to LA. But I think I'm getting a place here in New York. Sam's convinced me.
What did I say?
No, your place convinced me.
Oh.
It's got a good view. He knows how to be subtle and persuasive. All right, talk to you guys soon. TaiLopez.com/Sam, SAM, or click the link